Greetings and welcome to all our viewers. I am Dale Simmons, President of the League of Women Voters. We are nonpartisan, that is, we do not support or oppose any candidate. Along with the Forum's Planning Committee, we serve the community by offering an unbiased public platform for the voters to get to know the candidates. The Planning Committee members for this forum are the Central Valley Partnership, Exeter Chamber of Commerce, League of United Latin American Citizens, League of Women Voters of Tulare County, Mi Familia Vota, Tulare Chamber of Commerce, Tulare County Farm Bureau, Visalia Chamber of Commerce, and the Visalia Times-Delta Tulare Advance Register. The Planning Committee is happy to present tonight's candidates forum for the seats of California State Assembly District 26 and Kaweah Delta Healthcare District Zone 5. For the first half of the forum, we have Assembly District 26 with incumbent Devon Mathis and challenger Phelps. After a short break, we have Kaweah Delta Healthcare District Zone 5 with incumbent Nevin House and challenger Ambar Rodriguez. Thank you for tuning in tonight. With that, I'll turn the screen over to our moderator, James Ward of the Visalia Times-Delta Tulare Advance Register. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we start on the forum and introduce our candidates, wanted to go over the ground rules with the audience and the candidates. The candidates will have a 2-minute opening statement, followed by questions that they will have 90 seconds to answer, and then we will have a closing statement of one minute. We've asked the candidates per league rules not to name their opponents and also not to have any personal attacks. The timer will be from the League of Women Voters, and she will show the candidates when they have 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 15 seconds to go with their statements. And we're switching out the timer right now. We drew cards, and Mr. Phelps will go first with his introduction. So we'll start right now with Mr. Phelps.
Great. Thank you so much, James. Hi, everybody. My name is Drew Phelps. I'm running for Assembly District 26. I'm fourth generation from our district. I'm a small business advocate, and I'm also an affordable housing specialist. I'm running because just really simply, we deserve so much better from Sacramento. We deserve solutions that are tailored to the needs of our communities in Tulare, Inyo, and Kern counties, rather than the statewide one-size-fits-all solutions that we see so often imposed on us from urban areas. I've worked for 2 Republican legislators who represented us very effectively in Sacramento, and since then, I've gone on to work in both the nonprofit and the private sectors. I'm really running to combine my passion for the district with that experience bringing the public and the private sectors together. During my time with Citizens for Hospital Accountability in Tulare, I organized residents of the district, and we worked tirelessly to save the Tulare Regional Medical Center, which was dealing with significant issues, whether it's financial, legal, or with their leadership. We ran a 2-year-long campaign. We're very successful, and we succeeded in defeating a bond measure that would have cost the county millions, and we replaced all 5 board members to ensure a fresh start for the hospital. My priorities in Sacramento are going to be greater access to water, both for families and for our farms, getting our district back to work by supporting small businesses and expanding job opportunities and vocational training, and improving our healthcare system to fight against COVID-19, making sure we're better prepared for the next emergency. These really aren't partisan issues. They're basic quality of life issues that affect all of us every single day. I'm running because we've been ignored by Sacramento for way too long, and our district deserves better. We deserve a representative whose door will always be open to everyone, who will rise above partisan politics and really be a voice for change in Sacramento. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I hope I can earn your vote this November.
Mr. Mathis, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm just a poor boy from a poor family out of Porterville. Grew up doing simple tasks like cutting fire lines and doing those things. Went to school, joined Boy Scouts, served our community there. And after high school, went on, joined the National Guard, served 2 combat deployments in Iraq. made sure all of our guys got home. I myself got injured. I know the struggle. I went through the VA system. I've been on unemployment. I've been on workman's comp. I know what it's like as a father to provide for a family, to have children. Just this morning, had a great success with the family. My youngest son, 5 years old, got a star award at school, so that was pretty cool. But I know the struggles, and my whole thing is paying it forward and continuing to serve. I've served the community since I was a child, and I served in the military, and I've served as your assemblyman for the last 6 years. And we've worked on everything from water to building a better business economy to increasing our transportation, better healthcare access in our communities, better funding formulas for our local schools, ensuring that we fight to get rural broadband, ensuring that our agricultural community gets the fair shake that they deserve, and really making sure that you get the services that you deserve from your assembly member, and that's constituent services. It's making sure that you have the liaison to help you with the state bureaucracies. Tim, I believe you're up.
Thank you. I'm having a little bit of technical problem here. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I got kicked out of the room. So we'll go on to the next question. Opening question, and we'll start with Mr. Mathis. What do you think are the main duties of the elected office you are seeking, and why are you running for re-election to that office?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. You know, a lot of people, especially now, they think of politics, they think of their elected as the talking heads they see on the news. And they see it as Democrat versus Republican, which is why I always talk about people over politics, about making sure that you and your families are put first. The biggest thing that we have, and my biggest job as your assemblyman, is to be that liaison, to be a customer service office for you when you're dealing with a state agency, whether it's DMV, whether it's the EDD, whether it's the air board, the water board, you know, to make sure that as you're going forward, you don't have to get stuck on a 1-800 number to a government agency that doesn't care about you. Because when you hit that wall and you hit that frustration, you need somebody to go to. And that's what my office is here for. That is our primary reason of existence, is to make sure that you are being treated right by the state and that you have somebody to back you up. Now, the other thing is to push to get more resources here to you at home. You know, every day I fight to bring down that cost of living that affects you and your family. And I know what it's like to sit there at the table and do the bills and provide for a family. And the main job I think about is making sure that it actually comes home and makes sense to you.
Mr. Phelps, do you need me to reread the question, or are you okay?
My microphone is muted. Okay, great. No, I'm happy to answer the question. Really, what I see state assembly as is really one step up from your local government, right? And so really addressing those issues, a couple of them I touched on really quickly earlier, but just to expand on those, I mean, we have such basic quality of life issues in this district because we do have such a divide in this state between the urban parts and the rural parts. And we, frankly, in our more rural areas, have been ignored for just way, way too long. Folks in Sacramento haven't been our friends over the years. And so being able to really bring that voice, personally, as someone who is a Democrat, but who represents the voice of this district and all interests within this district, I'm going to be very passionate to be able to bring that united voice to Sacramento and be much more effective in getting it represented. So in that process, we're obviously going to work on access to water, both more water through the Delta, expanded storage, but also looking at the fact that we have so many folks in our district that lack access to clean drinking water in their own homes, which to me is a disgrace, should have been addressed a long time ago. And we have positive things in the works, bills that have been passed to address that. But we need continuous appropriations and continuous representation to address that. And so happy to look at those other issues as we get on into the debate.
Thank you. We'll go to question number 2, which will be, what would your top 3 legislative agenda goals if elected or reelected to the office? And we'll start with Mr. Phelps.
Yeah, so I just touched on the one that's most important to me, particularly the drinking water issue, but also making sure that our ag industry, which is the engine of our local economy, is able to stay going strong, particularly addressing issues like we have in the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Moving beyond that, I'm really a strong advocate when it comes to healthcare. Looking at my background with Citizens for Hospital Accountability, having been such a proud member of that group and getting our hospital reopened, healthcare is incredibly important to me. And so particularly when it comes to attracting more doctors and nurses to our area, as well as keeping those folks who are interested in those professions in our area, looking at the residency program at Kaweah Delta, bringing more funding for that because it's the last step before doctors go out into the workforce and start their practice. So that's a great way to attract and keep them here locally, as well as those pathway programs I mentioned. So our local students can get their feet wet in those programs, get the training that they need as they move up the ladder, and are really able to then stay local and practice here locally within our community. And last but not least, looking at vocational education, access to workforce training, both starting from a young age. I would love to see vocational education across the board as early as middle school, so folks get interested in those jobs, but also for workforce training for those folks who are pushed out by things like coronavirus, issues like automation, that they can get quickly retrained and back into good quality jobs right away.
Thank you. Mr. Mathis, same question.
Absolutely. Thank you. You know, a lot of these issues we've been working on for years, and it's not quite a wave a magic wand and make it happen. Government takes time, sadly and unfortunately. You know, my top issues have always been working to get more water here, not just water, but clean, pure water for families to drink. We've passed several bills over the last 6 years to do that. I work bipartisanly doing that. You know, we work on rural broadband. We work on the education formula to get more funding to our rural areas and our rural communities, to our schools, to ensure that our children have access to good education. We do the same thing with healthcare. Just this year, the relationships I have in Sacramento helped save a clinic in Orosi. We also look at all of these other things that happen. We have good bills and bad bills that come down from Sacramento. My biggest number one thing is to protect you and your family, to bring common sense home, and to make sure that at the end of the day, when you're looking at what's going on, it makes sense, and that way you have somebody that you can count on to come back home and explain to you what the chaos in Sacramento is bringing.
Thank you. Our next question will be, sorry, we're going to add the question to the queue, and it's taking a little bit of time to do this, but I will read it for you once I get it up, but it's... I apologize. We are having technical difficulties at the Times Delta. The computer system is kicking me off. But the third question for Mr. and we'll have to go with Mr. Mathis is, the district you are representing is more conservative, poorer, and less educated than other parts of the state. how would you make sure your constituents' concerns are addressed in Sacramento?
Absolutely. We do this. This is called coalition building. And I've done that. I've built relationships over the last 6 years, and that's something that we would lose if I didn't return to Sacramento. We have different caucuses that meet. We have a mental health caucus. We have a rural caucus. We have a San Joaquin Valley caucus. We build across party lines to look at basic issues and talk about what it's like in rural culture. I do so much work on this. I actually was elected to an international board with all of the ag chairs across the US and the Canadian provinces to discuss rural and agricultural issues because of my expertise in the field. They nominated me to this board. I was elected to that board as well. So I have connections, not just here in the state of California, but also within the rest of the US and other states. So we can work on these things. We can also apply pressure to the federal government through our networks to seek federal legislation as well. We continue to do this. We continue to work on the issues. You know, there's a huge rural-urban divide, and it's not a partisan divide. It's a divide between the 13 big cities in California versus everybody else. And we have the coalitions. I work with them daily. And with your support, we can continue the good work and continue building those relationships so we can bring more home to our rural areas.
Mr. Phelps, same question.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we obviously, it's no secret to folks that we live in a state with a legislator that is currently dominated by Democrats. As a Democrat myself, but like I said, someone who represents all of our local interests, Democrat, Republican, whatever you may be, I am going to bring that united, strong voice to Sacramento and in a much more effective way. In the light of this campaign, we have already seen in a Zoom event, granted, because it's during coronavirus, we wanted to stay very socially distanced, but we had the Speaker of the Assembly come and join us for an event, and he has been able to hear the concerns of some of the constituents within the district, some of which he hadn't heard before. And so really looking at something I learned while I was in Senator Andy Videk's office that he was very successful with is bringing those legislators from the urban areas who may not know how things are here in our district. They think that their food at the grocery store, they don't know where it comes from. They think it just shows up on the shelves. Bringing them here to our district, showing them how the folks here live and how difficult life is for so many of us is a critical way to get the message across and to make sure that they're seeing what we see and realizing how vital these issues are and how quickly we need action on them. I haven't seen those legislators here in the district in a long time, and that's something that I'm going to change from day one in Sacramento.
Thank you. We'll go on to the fourth question. With California's first ever rules for pumping groundwater coming, what role should your office play in ensuring the continued availability of water for growers and homeowners with wells? And we'll start with Mr. Phelps.
Definitely. This is obviously one of the most vital issues we face in terms of how pressing it is with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act coming into effect. And so really looking at, it mentions the growers first in the question. Like I mentioned earlier, getting more water through the Delta, bringing more storage online, whether that's the Sites Reservoir project or the Temperance Flat project, looking at ways that we can make that work. There are so many different ways that we really need to look at bringing more water to our district, surface water for our ag industry. When it comes to the Delta, looking at things besides just flow, the amount of water flowing through the Delta is a great way to be able to, build more habitat for the fish life there while also bringing more ag south to the valley. Looking beyond that for those folks who are on wells, I'm a huge advocate for some of the programs that are already in existence when it comes to getting those folks connected to existing municipal systems if they're close enough. That's really the number one solution and something that has been done over the years. But as I said, we need a strong advocate to be able to continue to get that appropriation and that funding from Sacramento to continue to be that strong voice, which we haven't had lately. And so really bringing those things together, both the surface water and the groundwater mitigation projects, is top of mind, my number one priority.
Mr. Mathis, same question.
All right, thank you. No, water is an extremely big issue here. It's the lifeblood of the valley. It's great to hear that my work is mentioned. One of the first things I did when I got elected was deal with Eastside Portable, where we tied in the east side with existing water. We're currently working on multiple systems, tying Tooleyville in with Exeter. We're looking at different systems out in the Cutler-Orosi area right now, and building on the work that we've already done. We've passed the legislation to do that. We've passed legislation to provide grants and loans to disadvantaged families and ensure that other families can get the loans to get these tie-ins done. This is work I've already done, folks. Now, as far as Sigma goes, we just recently passed groundwater sustainability legislation to ensure that our farmers get a fair say on what's happening with their water on these Sigma boards. We've also provided other legislation to ensure that we are looking at the Bryant Kern Canal to make sure that we're able to keep that canal working. We're losing tons and tons of water that we could be getting because the canal is aged out. We have to provide funding to increase our infrastructure. Water infrastructure is number one. We have to make sure that we turn on the pumps and move water south and do every infrastructure project possible to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Our next question is, what role should your office play in ensuring residents get safe and affordable drinking water? And we'll start with Mr. Mathis.
Absolutely. We actually just did this. I was out in Orosi today handing out water that my office helped get. Our county ran out of emergency water. They had been waiting on the Red Cross for weeks. And because of my networks, because the people that I know, that I work with, that trust me, when I make the phone call and say, hey, my county's out of emergency water, they pick up the phone, they answer, they make calls, and they help us. We brought in truckloads of water, and I got to see that on families' faces today. I met a mother who was walking with her 2 children that had to walk 3 miles, and I made sure that we got her right back home so she didn't have to carry food and water back 3 miles. This is a huge issue, and we work daily. We have community meetings. We bring different offices together. We bring the county supervisors in with our nonprofits. We work with El Quinte de Sol. We work with everyone to bring everybody together to the table to work with not just state agencies, federal, county, nonprofits, city, to ensure that families are getting clean, potable water and doing these networks. I wish it worked faster, and it's sad and tragic to see the pace of government, but we cut through as much red tape as we can, and I welcome anybody to come up to Sacramento with me to see how it goes under the dome. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phelps, same question.
Sure. So we all know it's nice to get water delivered that'll last us for a couple of weeks. But beyond that, looking further into the future, it's really a project and a problem that requires a long-term solution. We saw that last year with SB 200, Senator Melissa Hurtado's bill. Senator Hurtado has endorsed my campaign because what she tells me is we need more voices like ours coming up to Sacramento to tell the folks up there what the Valley needs and what is so vital for our folks when it comes to this serious issue that, like I said, should have been addressed years and years ago. And so really looking at the fact that in SB 200, a lot of that money is set aside specifically for water projects, whether it's the municipal hookups, whether it's maintenance of surface water treatment facilities. Those are funds that are online, but in many cases also need to be reappropriated year after year, whether it's through the general fund or other sources. And so having that continuously strong voice and that representation from the Valley able to get that message across, bring everybody around and understand the issues that we face here is really the number one priority for me.
Thank you very much. We'll go with question number 6, and that's how would your office balance environmental concerns with economic development? And we'll go with Mr. Phelps first.
Sure. So I don't see it as one or the other. One of the programs that I talk about so much because it's such a great program and needs expansion, particularly here in the Valley where we do have some of the worst air quality in the country. We have the highest rates of asthma in the whole country, which isn't completely our fault. Some of that pollution comes from other parts of the state, but we also see a lot of older vehicles on the road here. And so looking at ways that we can continue and, like I say, bolster the program that gets older cars, older tractors, other vehicles off the roads and the fields, and gets them replaced with incentives where whether it's a farmer or a private citizen getting the new vehicle, they're able to get tax incentives in exchange for getting those vehicles off the road and getting new, cleaner burning vehicles, whether those are gas burning or electric. Just the fact that they're cleaner and they're going to be preserving our air quality here because there's so much we need to do to get it cleaned up. And so, like I say, that in my opinion is a way that we can have both business represented well. We have, whether it's car dealerships or tractor dealerships in the mix, they're receiving some of those funds. And the folks who are going to be implementing those new vehicles and putting them to work are going to be reaping the benefits too. So in my opinion, it's not necessarily a one or the other. It definitely can go hand in hand. And that's really what my campaign is all about.
Thank you. Mr. Mathis, same question.
Absolutely. I actually appreciate the compliments I just heard. We worked really hard on these programs. One of them was the Carl Moyer program, making sure that our farmers are able to get funding to replace their equipment with newer, modern upgrades. I worked on this with former Governor Jerry Brown in depth. We continue to work on these things today. You know, it's one thing for the government to tell us that we have to do these things. It's the other to help us do them. And the way in doing that is providing incentives, providing tax incentives for our industries to move forward. And that's one of the big fights with this. We also have to look at the balance between the environment and the industry. And we do that. We do a great job of that. Here in California, we have the strictest environmental standards in the entire world. And really the work that our industry folks are doing, that our agricultural businesses are doing when they're producing our food, it's amazing. And, you know, I've been out there, I've been in the field, I've gotten my boots and my hands dirty looking at this work, and we continue to bring back the nuts and bolts of this to Sacramento to ensure that the policies are right. Because it's one thing to hear a blanket policy, it's another to ensure that it will actually work. And frankly, I'm sick of hearing these utopian ideas come out of our governor when he doesn't understand that we have working families that can't afford to live in his utopian vision.
Thank you. We'll go to question number 7. And it's what legislative solutions would you propose to better manage future wildfires, and how should the state work with authorities on federally managed land?
Well, first, we need our governor to stop suing the federal EPA in regards to cleaning up the forest. And, you know, I'm really sick of seeing these partisan battles happen with our governor and with the Democrat Party here, because we need to clean up the forest. We need to listen to our forest managers. I spent years with Governor Brown's tree mortality task force, going up, listening to the foresters, taking tours, looking at the real science behind what's happening in our forest. The fact that we have overgrowth happening that's killing our trees, that's sucking the water away from them. We have to clean that up. Not only cleaning that up, but it will also help with our snowpack and getting more water here to the valley. We have to look at this balance, but without cleaning up the forest, we see these days and weeks where frankly it's raining ash, horrible air quality. And it's one thing to say, oh, let's blame climate change on humans and tailpipes of vehicles, but really we live in the 21st century, folks. We put a man on the moon using a slide ruler. And when I hear these arguments of, well, there's not enough funding or there's not enough this come from the governor and the Democratic Party here in Sacramento, it's really frustrating because they blow money on all their pet projects instead of doing what's necessary. And that's getting up there, cleaning out our forest. We push for biomass, we push for microgrids, and we need to do this. Your lights need to stay on during fire season. And the partnerships and the relationships I have in Sacramento, we continue to fight to ensure that your air's good, and your lights stay on. Thank you.
Mr. Phelps, same question.
Sure. I've answered this question many times, and my answer is always the same, that we have to look at both sides of it, right? Climate change is obviously a huge issue. It is real, folks. And so being able to take a look at the policies that California has implemented, we do have a very aggressive stance on environmental issues and making sure that our emissions are being cut down. Those are a great start. Looking at the fact that we have hotter, drier summers and our winters are warmer, we have infestations of bark beetles in the forests and are keeping our trees, killing them off. And really what that creates is so much issue when it comes to just making the forest a tinderbox. We have layers and layers of leaf litter. And so looking at forest management is also a huge key. Whether or not you agree with climate change, even if you do, as I do, you have to understand that the reality is what it is. And we do have such a serious issue that we see every year play out again and again. And so getting the folks able to manage the forest, the undergrowth, getting that out and cleaned up, as well as thinning out dead trees that have been decimated by the bark beetles is incredibly important to me. So I would continue the environmental aspirations we have, but we also have to take a long look at managing our forests better.
Thank you. Our eighth question is, what role should your office play in ensuring good air quality in the district and California? And we'll start with Mr. Phelps.
Yeah, so that really goes back to just looking at ways that we can get old cars and other vehicles off the roads. Looking at the wildfires as well. Those are both two issues that play hugely into this debate. And looking at the fact that we do have such an issue when it comes to whether it's the emissions that are coming out of tailpipes. We have two huge arteries for shipping here in the valley on the Highway 5 and 99, which we really need to be able to get cleaner burning vehicles on those, as well as the wildfires, where we do need forest management to be able to keep that cleaned up and keep from getting these huge CO2 emission events, like I said, every year and year after year. So looking at both of those issues is incredibly important. Like I say, part of the problem, unfortunately, we can't control as much when it comes to emissions coming in from the Bay Area and other parts of the state. I've even seen studies that show there are container ships from China that bring emissions into our area. And so looking at ways that we can really influence others across the world to get up to the standard that California is incredibly important as well, making sure that we hold others accountable and are able to get that message across. And that's the whole reason we set these standards, right, is to set that example and to make sure that others eventually comply and become much stronger on this issue.
Thank you. Mr. Mathis, same question.
Absolutely. No, we continue to do this work. You know, if you look at what we're doing with our dairy digesters, the tariffs that we're working with the PUC to ensure that we're able to, instead of dairies being a key polluter, now with the recent studies we did partnerships with UC Davis, and they're looking at the fact that these methane capture methods are actually possibly a renewable fuel. This is legislation that I'm looking forward to running to get this methane capture method part of our renewable portfolio. You know, this is why we fought to ensure the funding for Highway 99 not be taken away by Gavin Newsom. This is why we complain that we're wasting $6.2 million a day on high-speed rail when we could do that other things with those funds. I mean, think about it, folks, $6.2 million a day. This isn't the project that was promised. Imagine what we could do to get our forest clean so it's not raining ash. Imagine what we could do with microgrids. Yes, electric vehicles are part of things too, like hydrogen vehicles, but it comes down to paying for that infrastructure and getting the funding there. And I look at different resources to do that every single day to make sure that as we progress into the 21st century, it's actually economically sound for you and your family. And that's the biggest thing. We need to make sure that as these policies move forward, we're not increasing the cost of energy on you and your family. Nobody should be paying $500, $600, $700 or more a month during the hot summer days. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to a criminal justice question. What's your opinion on recent reforms in California criminal justice, the criminal justice system? Do you think prison realignment has been successful? And do you support the proposed reform of the California bail system? And we'll start with Mr. Mathis.
Absolutely. I think it's a mess. I think what was done is an absolute mess. This is why I'm endorsed by all three of the sheriffs from all three counties that I represent. This is why I'm endorsed by the Deputy Sheriff's Association, by our local police associations. Folks, this is a huge issue. This catch and release is horrible. This is why I support Prop 20, because we need to reform this stuff. We need to make sure that criminals are put in jail and that victims' rights are being looked at. Since when do criminals get more rights than the victims and their families? It's absolutely wrong, and I'm sick of seeing this happen. You know, we see these guys run out there, and we get into this debate whether blue lives matter or black lives matter. You know, look, I'm pretty sure Jesus summed this up over 2,000 years ago. All life matters. But we need to back up the people in uniform that step out every single day, kiss their wives and children goodbye, and go out and keep our streets safe. This is why I have their support, because I stand up for them in Sacramento. This year, I helped lead a filibuster effort that blocked horrible criminal justice bills from being heard at the last night of session. I know how to make even the small Republican numbers in Sacramento count, and I intend to keep doing that for you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phelps, same question.
Sure. So I'll just start out by saying, you know, despite the fact I'm a Democrat, I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement. I know that there are so many law enforcement folks out there doing their job every day, and there are those few bad apples that those folks in law enforcement want to see out, and we should have reforms in place to be able to improve the pathways for those whistleblowers to be able to make that message heard. Beyond that, in terms of prison realignment, you know, we saw in 2019, it was the lowest year in recent history for crime in California. So the folks who are blowing whistles about, you know, crime is going up, it's just not true when you look at the statistics. In terms of things like expanding the prison system, we saw as recently as less than 10 years ago that we had such high prison overcrowding here in California that the Supreme Court ruled that it was cruel and inhumane punishment. So really looking at ways, and I think we have been to an extent successful, to continue to reduce the prison population. You know, there are so many folks in the private prison industry that would love to see us strengthen our laws and make sure that we're getting more folks sent to prison, but then that funding would be spent on more prisons when it could be spent on schools and issues like homelessness, where we're getting people mental health care that they need.
Mr. Ward, I think you're still muted.
To the 10th questions, what will you do to ensure our local small businesses are protected as the pandemic continues? And we'll start with Mr. Phelps.
Yeah, so I'm a strong supporter of making sure that our small businesses have the PPE that they need. I personally, even though I'm not elected yet, was able to gather up some PPE through the folks that I know here locally and deliver those to our local healthcare professionals as well as some small business folks. And so making sure that those costs, which are in many cases going to be huge, are covered, and the folks have the assurance from the government, whether it's from the state government as well as the federal government, that they are able to go about their business without being worried about going bankrupt or about closing down. Being able to provide them that assurance that if they keep that plan in place, they're able to keep folks safe, they're keeping socially distanced, they're wearing their masks, that they are able to stay open without that uncertainty of, are we going to have to be closed up again tomorrow? When is the next closure coming? Who knows exactly what the timeline is for reopening? And so I've always been a really strong advocate of saying, okay, if you have your plan in place, you're able to maintain the safety standards as the local public health officers see fit, you should be able to be open and serving folks. And so providing for the businesses what they need, very important, but also making sure they have that assurance and that certainty of when they're going to be able to remain in business.
Thank you. Mr. Mathis will be next, and I'm again having technical problems. I got kicked out of this chat room. I'm sorry about this, but we'll go with Mr. Mathis now.
Absolutely. This is a great question. And you really, folks, we got to get beyond the talking points. It's easy to hit all the talking points, but what we really need to look at is the tax incentives to make sure that the franchise tax board is giving our small businesses relief. We need to ensure that they are getting loan forgiveness during these COVID times. And I've actually fought and helped bipartisanly get legislation done just this year to ensure that we get some actual relief. We ensured that we got PPE out to the workforce. We look at things every day. I have close relationships with all of our local chambers and with Cal Chamber. We do conversations, we listen to them. I host policy pods where we have the group stakeholder conversation to see what else can be done. We do this ongoingly. The problem is that big unions who don't support me, who have funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars against me in this campaign, don't want to see that. They want to see somebody else from the Democrat Party get elected that isn't going to back up small businesses, that's going to support labor unions. And I'm not for that. I'm for making sure that our businesses are able to be open, that they're able to serve their customers, and that they get all the help they possibly can. And that's why I have a great relationship with so many of them. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question, and it's about the pandemic. The pandemic has shown us how important the gig economy is. How can government balance innovation and regulation when it comes to independent contractors and companies?
Well, thank you. This gets into what I was just saying, folks. The labor unions in the state out of LA in the Bay Area have funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars against me because I stand up to them in Sacramento. They want to see somebody else besides me get elected, so that way they can have another puppet, another rubber stamp. And I'm not for that. I stand up to these guys daily because they want to see our gig economy. They want to see other industries fall into their union support system. And that's not right. If people want to be independent contractors, then they need to be allowed to be independent contractors. We also need to make sure businesses are accountable and treat them fairly. That's called good government. That's called balance. But when we see these unions force horrible legislation like AB 5, it's horrible. It's devastating. And we've seen hundreds of cutouts come back because they screwed this up in the first place. I was never for AB 5. I'm against this. And we need to ensure that our independent contractors continue to have the right to do business how they choose to do business without letting union lackeys get in the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phelps, the same question, please.
So it's really simple. The proposition that's before us when it comes to the gig economy, it really delineates very clearly between the rideshare companies that have put over $180 million behind their campaign to make sure that they can continue to pay folks less than half of minimum wage to do their jobs, versus the folks who are truly independent contractors and who should be exempted from AB 5. There are so many folks out there that aren't part of those exemptions and haven't had their voice heard. And I talk to those folks every single day. There are so many that were exempted this year, but this round of exemptions left off so many. And so for those folks out there who are struggling under that burden of AB 5, I would, as one of my first actions in Sacramento, look to make sure that they can continue to see that exemption and move forward as an independent contractor rather than a full-time employee. For the rideshare folks, that's something that I'll never support. Those companies are making huge profits off the backs of everyday folks. There are so many within the district that do those jobs and don't receive the benefits that they should for that. Those companies have threatened to move out of state. That's just not feasible with the size of the market share that California provides them. And so, I really see it delineated as that. The independent contractors that are truly independent contractors, I support to a great extent.
Thank you. We'll go on to the 12th question. And do you support Proposition 15, also known as the split roll tax, that would lead to increases in taxes on some business properties? And we'll start with Mr. Phelps.
Sure. So I'll just open by saying we know for a fact, and it's been the case for so many years, particularly here in our district, that our public facilities, our infrastructure have underwent serious degradation. We have firefighters and other public employees that are taking pay cuts this year. And in addition to that, we know that our schools, which are already underfunded, are going to be taking huge burdens on when it comes to funding because of coronavirus. There are so many different things, whether it's masks, PPE, new screens between students. There are just so many different new pieces of equipment and different procedures that they need to implement. And so there really is such a strong need for this funding. I do support Prop 15, but that's with the caveat that for our local family farms, the $3 million limit is not enough. That is really going to be, I know I'm saying it a lot, but I'm going to get a lot done. And that is my number one priority. One of my number one priorities when getting up to Sacramento is expanding that cap for our local family farms, because what this law is really meant to do is to impact the biggest of the big businesses that can't leave California, the Disneys, the Googles, the Facebooks. And you even see folks within those businesses supporting the proposition. So really, I intend to only make it impact the largest of the corporations. I think that cap should be a lot higher.
Thank you. Mr. Mathis, same question.
Absolutely, folks. Prop 15 isn't what they make it out to be. They try to make it sound like, hey, we're going to tax you and we're going to pay for more schools and we're going to pay for more stuff. Folks, I sit on the Budget Subcommittee 1, which is Health and Human Services. They're always on the chopping block first. The state spends millions and millions of your dollars wasted. Again, I mean, just look at the simple example of high-speed rail, $6.2 million a day. And now you have the Democrat Party wanting to increase more taxes. This is ridiculous. This is why I'm endorsed by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, because I believe in protecting your property rights and not increasing your taxes. They want to go back and, to sit here and say you want to go back and, well, next year I'll try the legislative process to change something. It's a joke, folks. Once these things get through, it's an uphill battle to fight back. And the last thing Sacramento does is let go of funding. The solution is not bigger government. It is not more taxes. It's less taxes, less red tape regulation, and smaller government. And this proposition is horrible. It's going to hurt families. We're going to lose more farms, and we're going to lose our way of life here in the Valley if this thing passes. I ask you to vote no.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the audience question part of the forum. Our first question is, in the assembly, what would you do to close the digital divide that prevents many of our rural communities from having affordable internet access? And we'll start with Mr. Mathis.
Absolutely, folks. The rural-urban divide, when it comes to internet, when it comes to access, this is why I supported the 5G bill a few years back. This is why I'm working with the State Ag and Rural Legislative Group. We have a great group going on there right now. Land O'Lakes is involved. Tractor Supply is involved. And really, as we continue to push these things on the government end, we have to build on those relationships with the private sector AT&T just came in as part of the coalition as well, looking to build more hotspots in rural areas. Part of this is also getting more funding to our rural schools. We have other schools that have put their own towers up that are providing hotspots, and this is the fundamental problem, is that the big city politicians out of Sacramento, these bigwig Democrats, don't want to use the abundance of tax dollars to pay for that last line to get out here in our rural areas. Sadly, these Democrats go, well, if you just move into the city, you'd have access. And I think that's BS, folks. I think your families and your children, our schools, our seniors deserve better. That's why I support things like telehealth, and that's why I continue to carry this fight to Sacramento and work with other partners to get us access so we can have internet wherever we're at. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phelps, we can ask the same question for you.
Sure. So I'll just go back to the fact that we have had over the years so many legislators come and visit our area. That hasn't happened in the past 6 years. They haven't seen how we are living here, and part of that falls on them, but part of that falls on our leadership. And so getting those folks here to see the urban-rural digital divide is incredibly important. And so part of it is bringing more funding. Part of it is working on tax incentives, because to be completely frank, those companies are driven by profits, and they don't want, in many instances, to provide those services because it just doesn't make their bottom line. And so figuring out ways that we can work with them to make it work financially is a huge step. Also looking at, when it comes to the school districts, making sure that in these current times we're able to get students access to those services. I've seen a lot of really innovative ideas when it comes to especially school districts that have, even in normal times, maybe an abundance of buses, putting those buses at various spots throughout their school districts and being able to hook up mobile hotspots to those so students have access to that. That would be something that I would be very happy to push a bill for when it comes to getting funding for those hotspots and being able to keep those running. And I think there are a lot of other innovative ideas out there that we can continue to pursue, but those are just a few.
Thank you. Again, we were experiencing technical problems with at the Times Delta. We're getting kicked out of the chat room several times during the broadcast, and I apologize. But we'll go on to another audience question. Do you believe in campaign finance reform is necessary to minimize the influence of special interests, real or perceived, in California? And we will start with Mr. Phelps.
Sure. So as someone who doesn't receive really any money from folks in Sacramento, particularly those special interest groups like Walmart, Monsanto, as well as all of the tobacco companies and many others, I am really happy to look into some campaign finance reform. I think it would be great, whether it's a public campaign finance system where you're allotted a certain amount and that's all you can spend, or even just setting lower limits on folks. And that's why I was very happy to accept the spending limit in this race, because we are a grassroots powered campaign. We are driven by the people and for the people. And so that's definitely something that I would be interested in taking up because my campaign is not driven by special interests whatsoever.
We'll go with Mr. Mathis next.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to laugh right now. See, folks, what you don't hear is all of the special interest money that's going the other way. Labor unions pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars. You want to talk about special interest? You want to talk about finance? Look, I take funding all the time. I get funding from our agricultural coalitions, from the different companies there, from the people that are providing jobs here in the Valley. And I take that funding and I invest it here locally. I support our community events, our local charities, our local nonprofits. And I take that big Sacramento and I bring it back home and I invest it here in our communities so our communities can get that funding. I don't run around bragging about, oh, look at all this money I got. And, again, I'm a poor Okie kid. I can't just loan myself $70,000 to dump into a campaign to match what labor unions give me. So look at our campaign reports, folks. Look at who's getting special interest money from labor unions out of LA in the Bay Area. We don't need those type of politics here in the Valley. I urge you to look at the truth and look at those reports. Thank you. If you don't know where to look, go to Secretary of State and pull it up. And we have more technical difficulty, folks.
Hello. Looks like it's almost time for closing statements. Jim?
Yes, closing statements. I got kicked out of we're having massive problems here. We'll go with the closing statements with Mr. Phelps. And I apologize with the technical difficulties with this broadcast. But we'll go with Mr. Phelps with his closing statement.
Yeah, so I would just like to point out very quickly that when it comes to the money coming into our campaign, we have hundreds and hundreds of folks helping our campaign out. Like I said, it is purely grassroots driven, and we have far more individuals chipping in for us than anybody else. And so just really quickly to wrap things up, I'd like to thank everybody, the hosts who made the forum possible, everybody who asked questions, and everybody who joined us this evening. This election is really a turning point for us in the district because we don't have time for the same failed leadership of the last 6 years. I've been involved both from the private, the public, and the nonprofit sides of getting legislation through Sacramento, and I have that experience. What I want to accomplish really is not extreme. It's not a partisan one way or the other issue. It's very common sense, the solutions that are to challenges that folks in the district face every single day. Our slogan is our voice, because when I'm elected, I'll make sure everybody has a voice and is heard in Sacramento. Thank you, and I hope to earn your vote in November.
Thank you. And we'll wrap up this part of the forum, and we'll launch into the hospital forum about 7:10.
Am I going to get my closing statement?
Did we, excuse me? Did you did your closing statement?
No, Mr. Mathis did not do his closing statement yet.
We, I got kicked out, and I thought you did your closing statement. So let me add you to this, and go ahead.
There we go. Thank you for the closing statement time. Folks, look past the talking points. Look at somebody who has real experience, who's shown true leadership, not only as your representative, but as a military leader, as a community leader in the nonprofit sector, helping other veterans out. Look at somebody that has a proven record. Every single campaign year, we get somebody that comes in, they try to smear your name, they use ugly, horrible, grotesque tactics. If you want somebody that knows what it's like to raise a family, to pay bills, who knows what it's like to struggle and work their way up, I ask you for your continued support. You all have been with me for years. I appreciate you. I thank you. And as always, reach out to me direct, 559-202-5692. It's my personal cell phone number. I believe you ought to be able to call your representatives directly. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. And we'll break again for until 7:10, and we'll start with the hospital forum. So I want to thank Mr. Mathis and Mr. Phelps for logging in this week. And we again apologize for the technical problems we've had during this broadcast. Thank you very much. And we'll be back at 7:10 with the hospital board.
All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good evening. We are here at the second part of our forum today, and I want to reintroduce Dale Simmons, president of the League of Glory County Women Voters.
Greetings. I am here to introduce the candidates for the Kaweah Delta Hospital Board Zone 5. We have incumbent Nevin House and challenger Ambar Rodriguez. We thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dale. And next, we will go over the ground rules very quickly. We will have some questions from the audience towards the end of the broadcast, and then we will then we're having a little bit of technical problems here. Sorry about this. We will then we will first go with opening statements, and then we will have questions from the committee seated questions. So the ground rules will be: we will have opening statements for 2 minutes, and then questions for 90 seconds. And we will start with an opening statement by Mr. House.
Hello, my name is Nevin House. I have been on the Kaweah Delta board for almost 4 years now. I first came to the Visalia area back in 1976 when I moved up here to open a retail store. I've been in the area since then. I did live in Hanford for about 12 years back in the late 80s and into the 90s. I currently own a firm out in the industrial park and got elected to the board 4 years ago and have gone through most of the committees now. We kind of try to rotate through the committees because with each committee you learn a different part of the hospital. So I've been on everything from quality care to marketing to patient satisfaction, where I'm currently on, et cetera. About a year ago, I was elected the president of the board after having served as the secretary treasurer for about a year and a half before that. The direction of the hospital is something that is critical for this area. It's very important to me, and it is a situation where with COVID, we have run into a definite set of difficulties that no one ever expected before this, both financially and otherwise. And so that is something that has kind of changed what's going on in the hospital and made us have to look at a lot of different parts and try and figure out how to stay financially strong during this difficult time. I look forward to your questions, and I will do my very best to answer them. Thank you.
Ms. Rodriguez, for your opening statement.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me and organizing this forum. It's awesome. So my name is Ambar Rodriguez. Looks similar to Anna. I was born and raised here in the north side of Visalia. I received my bachelor's at the University of California, Davis. I moved to Washington, D.C., where I interned with LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. From there, I knew I enjoyed serving community, so I dedicated a year of service with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest. That led me to Eastern Montana, where I served on the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation. In Montana, I started having difficulties with my health, but still continued. I eventually went to graduate school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Marquette University, once again having health issues. And through my various states that I traveled to, I had to navigate not only through IHS, Indian Health Services, but the larger hospitals and overall hospital healthcare networks. Eventually, I came back to California, continued my health services at Stanford. When I finally got settled back in Visalia, I knew I wanted to become an educator, and now I'm currently a teacher with Farmersville Unified. Super excited for that. But because of my personal experiences, and I don't mean just as a patient in a hospital bed, but as someone who looked at hospital networks, the funding, the budgets, overall the policies, and reflected on, okay, what does healthcare mean for my community? And I knew I wanted to dedicate myself for my community. That is why ultimately I'm running for the hospital board. Not necessarily for me as an individual, but for my community, because representation matters. Thank you.
Thank you. we'll move to the question part of the forum. And with our first question, we'll start with Amber and Ms. Rodriguez. And the question is, what do you think are the main duties of the elected office you are seeking? Why are you running for that office? And what makes you qualified for that elected office you are seeking?
Awesome. So I know the duties, like I mentioned in my opening, has to do with not just policies, but the budgets, the funding, organizing, not necessarily the day-to-day what goes on at the hospital. That's CEOs for, but we are the ones who make the rules or regulations, and then they're the ones who follow it through. And I know besides the overall board that there's different committees as well. So these subcommittees are just as important, HR or even community. So I'm qualified, or I feel that I'm qualified, because I have navigated this already in Washington, D.C., in Montana, even on an Indian reservation, and multiple states, and as well as here at Visalia, even having to go to Stanford. So it's not just being a patient, it's being that super nerdy person, looking at the sources, analyzing the data, seeing, okay, where's the bias, prejudices, where are things coming from, where is this money being used and spent, and is it for my community? And always looking at what is for my community and how can it be for my community ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr. House, same question.
Well, thank you. I have certainly learned exactly what the main duties of the elected office are. One thing that was very important is that we are, as the board, are primarily responsible for the financial strength of the hospital and for the patient care. And my background of 40 years in business is definitely something that works on the financial, because the hospital is ultimately a business. It has to pay for itself. It has to make enough money to provide the services, and hopefully make enough that we can add additional services through the years, as we have in the 4 years that I've been on the board. We're looking forward to increasing what we provide for the people, as we have done for even before I was on the board. And the subcommittees, as are mentioned, are also critical, and as are the citizens committees. That's something that we started up since I joined the board. I've been the board delegate on all the citizens committees, so we've had them working to give us what the people thought was the best place for the hospital to expand, what the hospital should be doing, what we could do better, what we need to do more of, and that has been incredibly helpful to us. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to the second question. And what do you think the district's biggest challenges over the next 4 years will be? And we'll start with Mr. House.
Well, part of that is depending on how long COVID lasts. Right now, the biggest challenge we have is simply to stay financially strong and be able to provide services to the largest number of people. We've been very fortunate in having a tremendous brain power there, and people that are very knowledgeable in what they are doing. Even the CEO, the fact that he was previously the CFO, so he understood the finances, has been very helpful to us. We set up a budget this year with a zero, not even planning to make any profit at all. We're doing our best to achieve that. And the next 4 years, if that goes eventually away, which we all hope it does, it gets resolved due to vaccines, et cetera, then we're looking at having to come up with something to expand the hospital and create additional beds so that we have more capacity. And that is something that has been on the plans for several years now, and we will definitely get back to that as soon as we get out of the current COVID situation that we're in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez,
Awesome.
same question.
Just like Mr. House mentioned, that COVID is a big deal. It's happening right now. It's probably not going to be over for another few months or maybe a year. And resources, I feel that resources are the biggest issue, and not just resources for patients and community, but for the healthcare workers. And I don't mean healthcare workers, just nurses and doctors. Every single employee that exists in Kaweah Delta should have the resources they need to protect themselves, the PPE, whether or not you're taking out the trash, you're cooking the food in the cafeteria, every role is just as important. So not just protecting our patients, but also helping our healthcare workers so then they could work with dignity and respect. Another issue is keeping the residents or doctors or the healthcare professionals in our community. We are super rural. So a lot of people, they come by and they end up leaving. And I know there are programs in place and there are residents available to be here, but they don't stay. They're starting to stay at a much higher rate, but it is an issue. We are rural. We need to keep them here so we can have these healthcare professionals serve in our community and we can have a healthy community. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to the third question of the forum. And do you think the Healthcare District should seek to expand its tax collecting sphere into areas of Tulare County currently not paying taxes but using the hospital? And we'll start with Ms. Rodriguez.
Yeah, so I think it kind of depends. We need to see where the money is going. We can't just say tax in this very broad area without looking at the budgets and funds that exist. Is this money going for expanding a certain site, or is this money going to expand other things? So before we just say tax going to other areas, we need to be transparent and elaborate on where exactly this money is going before we just start saying tax. And if everybody's okay with it and we want to move forward, then we can expand into other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. House, same question.
Well, it's in terms of expanding our tax base, it would not make a huge difference in terms of just the small percentage that we get of the property taxes that's paid each year. It would make a difference if and when we go for a geo bond to build a new building, for example, a new bed tower or something similar. The downside of it, the other edge of the sword, is that we are required to get a 66 2/3 vote of approval by all the people that would be subject to that tax. And we may have the people out of the area voting at a lower rate than the people near the hospital would vote. And so even though we have a wider base and we would have a slightly lower payment, it may actually pull any vote we have down a few percentage points, which would make it more difficult to accomplish getting a geo bond passed. So there are pluses, there are minuses, and where they weigh out has been a subject of discussion now in the board and in many meetings for almost 2 years now. We've looked at this from every different angle, and there is no clear-cut answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hop to question number 4, and we'll stay with Mr. House. The hospital has violated state standards on nursing staff levels multiple times over the last several years. What should the board do to help increase nurse recruitment and retention?
Well, we've really worked hard to get as many nurses as we can get there. We work with COS. Obviously, we interview all of their nurses when they graduate. We bring in as many nurses from the outside as will come here. We also have traveling nurses that we hire, which are unfortunately extremely expensive, but sometimes you have to do that. The nursing staff levels has been a difficult thing at all hospitals in California, simply because there are not enough nurses in the state of California to cover all the hospitals for the number of beds they have. So trying to bring nurses in, travelers from out of state, et cetera, we've done all of those things. We've done better over the last year or two than we did previously. This has been a focus of the board, a focus of the administration, a focus of HR. And the number of nurses we have added has been tremendous, and we've done everything we can to try and keep the nurses where they want to stay with the hospital. Some of the difficulties is some of the other hospitals that are not district hospitals are able to offer huge signing bonuses, et cetera, and that's hard to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez? Same question.
Thank you. So this is something similar that I addressed earlier about keeping healthcare professionals in our rural area. And I think we need to look at the social factors that exist. A lot of times people end up coming here and they leave because they don't feel this is home. So how can we make this home? I knew a few people who left because they're like, oh, Visalia doesn't have a bowling alley, or I really like this type of food, but Visalia doesn't have it. Visalia is a gem. We have it. It's just a lot of times they're working these long, awkward hours, and they don't have the time to really explore Visalia. So there needs to be this social connect where they end up feeling that it's a place of home versus just a geographical space, they need to feel it in their heart. And once they know it's home, they're more likely to stay. Maybe it's finding a circle of friends or even playing adult sports, whether it's soccer or volleyball. They need that connect to stay in the community, to better serve the community. So then once again, we have a healthy community overall. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to question number 5. With hospital revenues declining because of the COVID-19 pandemic, how should the district prioritize the budget to continue to provide services? And we'll start with Miss Rodriguez.
Yes. So I think this is kind of a hard subject because we're in the middle of it, but looking at budget's always difficult. And I know a lot of times, especially the employees, they go to, okay, is my job going to get cut? So before we start cutting employees, we need to look at the factors. Okay, where is the money being spent? What can be eliminated? How can we get more money? Because like mentioned before, with COVID, there is a shortage of money. But once again, it has to be transparent, whatever we do. We cannot make decisions without the input of the community, of the employees, of the patients, and not just from a certain group of people, but expand it because it's beyond Visalia that uses the hospital. So as long as we're transparent, we can make the budget happen and we can be able to provide those services.
Thank you. Mr. House.
Well, this is something that we've been having meetings about for 7 or 8 months now, and trying to deal with the additional demands of COVID, the additional expenses, the millions of dollars every month that it is costing us because of the increase in length of stay, the increase in PPE, the increase in the medicine, the other equipment that we're using. At the same time, we are seeing many less people coming into the urgent cares, many less people coming into the ED, and also for several months we had to completely stop doing all of our elective surgeries, which is really the lifeblood of the hospital in terms of finances. We're now doing a limited number of elective surgeries that are kind of the elective ones but have to get done, and that is something that is helping. Indeed, we have been still having the community meetings, and we have been getting input from the community members, which do come from both local and some of the surrounding towns. And that has been invaluable in terms of giving us some ideas and directions as to what the community wants. And that's why those committees have been so valuable, and we are so lucky that we've had such wonderful people serving on them. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll stay with Mr. House, and for our next question is, if the Affordable Care Act is overturned, health economists say rural and small hospitals will be devastated. Should Kaweah Delta have a contingency plan if the ACA is repealed, and what plan should that be?
Well, that is something that also we have been looking at, and indeed, the problem will be that you will have so many more people that will be uninsured. And we will receive no payments on those because we take care of everybody that comes through that door, whether they can pay for it or not. That's part of being a district hospital. The ACA allowed them to expand Medicaid, which is Medi-Cal here. And by doing that, they covered a much larger percentage, but then they cut Medicare to kind of pay for that. So we received less of that. It has been tight on hospitals. Hospitals used to make 2 to 3 times the money that they do these days. The ACA being overturned will be devastating. What we would have to do is actually start looking at each one of our services, the services that lose money turning every month. If there is no grants or something to support them, we would have to make some very difficult decisions, and that's not going to be easy for the hospital. It's not going to be easy for the board. And it will be something that I'm sure will be made with a lot of consternation and some tears. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez, same question.
So there absolutely needs to be a backup plan, especially with Zone 5 when we're serving communities like Goshen and Ivanhoe, and most of these people are on Medi-Cal, very lower socioeconomic. So once that's removed, they don't have health insurance. So we need to have not only a plan to support them, but a plan to help them navigate, because a lot of people might have ACA, but they don't know how to go about the next steps. They go to the ER, but don't have a primary care physician, don't know about authorizations or referrals. So it's not just, okay, we have a plan to help those with the ACA, but how are we helping people navigate through these healthcare networks? Not just people, Medi-Cal, ACA, or private insurance. It should be open for all, because a lot of people need assistance just navigating the healthcare jargon and the network overall. So besides having a backup plan, we need to be able to support people instead of just saying, here's paperwork, primary care physician, follow up, when they don't even have no clue what a primary care physician is. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move on to question number 7, and we'll stay with Ms. Rodriguez. Should the hospital district continue offering services like the lifestyle gyms or convalescent care homes, or concentrate on the core hospital functions?
So I see Kaweah Delta not necessarily as a hospital, but as a healthcare network. And as a healthcare network, it's open to things such as a lifestyle gym or the convalescent homes that exist, because it's more than just one service. It's more than just, we have an emergency room, there's surgeons here. It's beyond that. And healthcare, like I said, spans many things. And so if it's getting people fit, if it's helping out certain generations, and that's what we need to do as a healthcare network and not just as a hospital.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. House.
Okay. There we go. A lot of that is exactly correct. We have the lifestyles gyms, we have the convalescent care homes, we have these outside entities because they help improve the health and the care that we can provide a wider range of people. As people get elderly, the convalescent care homes are helpful. The lifestyle gyms, if we can keep people in better shape, we definitely keep them from having to use the hospital as much. When they do go to the hospital, they maybe have a 2-day stay instead of a 5-day stay. We have a better chance of keeping them. We can reduce diabetes, which we have one of the highest levels of diabetes of any county in the United States. We can reduce obesity. We can reduce kidney problems, which is also a byproduct of diabetes. So we have seen improvements in all these areas with lifestyles, with our community health outreach programs, with our education programs. And that's why we do those, is if we can keep somebody from getting ill due to preventive care, that's always a better way to have healthcare, is to be a healthcare district, not just a hospital district. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to question number 8, and we'll continue with Mr. House. Do you support the district opening a health clinic in Tulare?
Yes, I do. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, we have a lot of specialists that, because the healthcare clinic in Tulare will be a rural health clinic, will be able to practice there. Many of them already practice at some of our other rural health clinics, but we run into difficulties with having enough space for them to practice, et cetera. In fact, we have 20 different specialists that go everything from pediatric cardiology to nephrology to cardiology, dermatology, podiatry, et cetera. Having it in Tulare in a larger building such as that, we have specialists that will want to practice here. They've told us they wanted to practice and work with the rural population, work with the Medi-Cal population, but we simply have run out of spaces, run out of offices, run out of exam rooms for them to work with in our existing rural clinics. Plus, it's much easier for most of them to get to Tulare than it is to get out to Woodlake or Exeter or Lindsay, et cetera, Dinuba. So that's going to be an advantage. I think that we will see a tremendous improvement in the specialty services we're going to be able to offer to the Medi-Cal population as soon as the health clinic opens in Tulare, and I'm very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez, you're up. Same question.
So expanding healthcare services is absolutely amazing, and expanding in Tulare would be great. But one thing that we need to be mindful of is we can't just erect a building and say, yay, we have healthcare, way to go. We have to be mindful of, does the community even know we exist? How can we reach out to the community? Did we collaborate with any community leaders? I know Tulare has their own hospital district and they have their own politics in their hospital, but always trying to collaborate, because that's when we can make the best healthcare services, when there's multiple people involved, multiple entities. So expanding healthcare wherever it is always super exciting, but we always have to be mindful. Ultimately, this is for the community. And what does the community want? What do they need? And how can we better serve the community? Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to question number 9, and we'll stay with Ms. Rodriguez. What direction should the district take to make the hospital, meet California seismic retrofit requirements?
Getting specialists, absolutely. So not just getting specialists from the area, but outside as well, and listening to actual data, looking at what's recommended and recommended from multiple groups and multiple people, so then we can move forward with the best plan possible. Hearing it from one's perspective might have a certain bias, another one a certain bias. So as somebody who looked at primary sources and secondary sources for funds, always evaluating the sources and then determining the next phase, the next route possible. And I think that's always super important, is to get experts before making any decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. House. Seismic retrofit.
Okay, that is something that I started working with actually before I was even elected to the board. It's been an interesting, let's say, almost 5 years of that, in that the state government who created the regulations for that have continuously moved the goalposts. And every hospital in California has been kind of chasing the goalposts. We've had certain situations such as the earthquakes we felt here about a little over a year ago that came out of the high desert up there. They had a new hospital that was totally seismic compliant that was built, and they had moved the patients over to there. When they had the earthquake, it actually had significant damage, and they had to move all the patients back to the non-compliant hospital because it was not damaged. And that's what they're learning from an engineering side. And that's my background, is as an engineer and scientist, and I understand that we don't always know everything. And so we learned that we pass laws, we build buildings to comply with them, and they don't necessarily help. Then we've got the finance side of it. Once we decide what we want to build and what we want to do, how do we pay for it? And unfortunately, as a district hospital, there is a whole big book of our limitations on what we can borrow, where we can get money from, and all of this. We have many limitations that a standard 501c3 nonprofit hospital does not have. And we have to work within those legal limitations to do the best we can. And we talked to lots of people about that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have a question from the audience next. Our next question is, how do you plan to be accessible to rural areas like Goshen and Ivanhoe? And we'll start with Mr. House.
Well, I've got, they can call the hospital and that message will be passed on to me. I have N-House at KDHCD at the hospital email system. I've got a Facebook page which has one of my cell phone numbers on it. They can call me right on my cell phone. They can send me a message on Facebook. It's got my email on there. They can send me an email. So they have all those ways to contact. I do try and get out and visit the rural health clinics from time to time. That's because you don't know what patients are in there. That's more to say hi to the employees every so often and tell them what a good job they're doing. Unfortunately, with COVID, that's something we've had to cut back on because of the limitations of them keeping the patients and the people separated from people who don't need to be there. And even a board member does not have to be there to do that. And so we're very careful about being in those situations. But I look forward to, after COVID, getting back to being able to do more of the visitations out there. I like the idea of maybe even doing meetings or town halls in some of the rural clinics, or rural areas. But again, that has to wait until after COVID goes away. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez, how do you plan to be accessible to rural areas like Goshen and Ivanhoe?
Okay, so I've already been accessible in those areas, especially on soccer Sundays. You catch me on the soccer fields, especially at the elementary schools, Goshen, Ivanhoe, most likely eating elote, sitting down, watching the games. But I'm not there, especially COVID, so games have kind of wound down. Virtual town halls, and not just looking at digital platforms like Facebook. A lot of these communities have WhatsApp or maybe a remind in order to send them a text message. But I know after COVID, like I mentioned before, I'm already accessible there. I'm already there eating at the restaurant or hanging out with the people at the elementary schools, going to the carne asadas. I'm there. And also something that I want to explore is church there, church in Goshen, church in Ivanhoe. And I think that is an amazing way to not only be part of a community, but to have that community experience, to know that their struggles and hardships are my struggles and hardships. And that goes back to representation, that I'm representing the people that already exist in those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna move to the closing statements for the forum, and we're gonna start with Ms. Rodriguez. For your closing statement, you have 1 minute.
Awesome. So like I said, I am absolutely dedicated to serving my community, and I'll be easily accessible, whether it's through a text message or you actually seeing me there in those communities. I'm relatable because your struggles and hardships were either mine or continue to be my struggles and hardships. Because of these experiences and understandings, I'm connected to the realities that exist Northside Visalia, Goshen, Ivanhoe, and I'm determined to advocate for accessibility to healthcare, resources, and pathways to keep our dedicated professionals in our rural areas. Because ultimately, a healthy community leads to a flourishing community, not just for myself or ourselves, but for the next generation as well. Once again, thanks for having me and overall organizing this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. House, we'll wrap up with you. Your closing statement, please.
Very good. Thank you. I'm real proud of the 4 years and what we've accomplished during the time I've been on the board. We added 263 doctors during that time. Not all of them have stayed, but the vast majority have. We've added doctors in some very good specialties that have helped the people, and I look forward to doing that. In terms of taking care of the people, we have to take care of everybody in the district, and even the people from outside the district to come. There is a outreach to talk to these people, to get their input. We have that set up now. We invite you to please come, and if you want to join these committees, we'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you for putting this on and giving me the opportunity to reach out and say what is going on at the hospital to all the people out there. I really appreciate it, and everyone stay safe, wear a mask, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. House, and thank you, Miss Rodriguez. That wraps up the forum tonight for both the Assembly and the House District. Log on Monday for another forum with we have with the Tulare City Council candidates. It starts at 6 p.m. Again, thank you for logging on, and we again apologize for some of the technical difficulties we had with the initial Assembly portion of the forum. Again, log on for next Monday to see the Tulare City Council forum. Thank you very much. Good night.